Thank you for the very nice introduction, Christian, and I'm really happy to be here. So basically this first slide is intended to kind of sum up what I do and what I love doing. I work with the drug safety concerns, so drug safety. My main aim is basically to try to inform clinical care by addressing drug safety, and I really enjoy the process of identifying new things to do, new concerns, trying to learn more about certain, different therapeutic areas and different drugs and different diseases, and trying to see if we can analyze these concerns. And when I feel done, I really like to move on to the next drug safety concern. So the title of this talk is Register-Based Research to Address Current Drug Safety Concerns with Examples from Denmark. So this is based on the work that I've been part of in Copenhagen at Statens Serum Institute, where I was an employee for about 6 years. Now I recently moved to Karolinska in Stockholm, where I'm a senior researcher trying to build up a research group in pharmacoepidemiology. I'm still affiliated with the Statens Serum Institute as well as a visiting researcher, and hopefully we can do binational studies through this link. So just given that I'm working with drugs and drug safety, I'd just like to mention that the work that I've been part of has not been supported by the pharma industry, apart from this grant, which was from the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which is separate from the company, and that was a grant for vaccine safety, so it hasn't anything to do with diabetes. And currently, I'm just looking for money. I have zero. So I couldn't even afford to come here, actually, so they paid. So a few words about Statens Serum Institute in Copenhagen. It's kind of like the Danish CDC. It's a National Institute for Disease Control. So the main responsibilities are to surveillance, prevention, and control of infectious diseases, congenital disorders. So that being that Statens Serum Institute is responsible for the neonatal screening, the PKU screening in Denmark, and also biothreats. The institute is also responsible for implementing and planning the national vaccination program in the entire country, and making certain that vaccines are supplied to the country, and also research. And up until recently, SSI, or Statens Serum Institute, was responsible for kind of collecting and analyzing healthcare data from all registries in the country, and also for e-health. But that has been moved out recently, and also this is the case for specialized diagnostics, which has also been moved out. So I guess that the 1,200 employees will be, or have been, reduced somewhat. So, drug safety concerns. So I'll just give a few examples what I mean by drug safety concerns. So this is an example of a risk signal. This is a paper published in JAMA in 2012, studying the association between an antibiotic, fluoroquinolones, and the risk of retinal detachment, which is a serious eye disorder. So these researchers from Canada find a relative risk of 4.5 for this association. And typically, this type of risk signal leads to news media reporting common antibiotics tied to eye emergencies, dangerous, and also drug public health agencies and drug agencies often pick up this signal and start to investigate them. So there's a period of uncertainty, and doctors just don't know what to do. Another example is drug safety in pregnancy. So this is a kind of a typical text you would see when you look up safety information in pregnancy for many drugs. So it says, adequate data regarding treatment of pregnant women with this particular drug are missing. the potential risk for the fetus is unknown. This drug should be used in pregnancy only if the benefit for the mother clearly outweighs the potential risk for the fetus. So we're asked to balance the benefit versus risk, but we don't know the risk. Obviously, concerned. Yeah, so, and a third example now, this comes from vaccine safety. This is a very, very sensitive kind of area because single cases may or often do get a lot of media attention. And these are just basically case reports of alleged vaccine adverse events. So this is a case of an 18-year-old girl who says to the newspaper, "I can't walk anymore," after having received Gardasil, the relatively new vaccine against human papillomavirus that leads to cervical cancer. So her family actually started the case against the producer of Gardasil. That's another story. But even though this is not a study, it's not a, it's basically a case report in a general news media. In the general news media, such things may often lead to drug safety concerns. And what we've seen in Denmark now, just recently, is that so this slide shows the vaccination coverage with the HPV vaccine in Denmark in the national program, and the bars are basically birth cohorts. So what we saw was that vaccination coverage increased during after the first few years of following vaccine introduction, but all of a sudden, the last 2 years, we've seen a decrease in vaccine coverage, which is pretty alarming, and probably this is because of concerns about the safety of the HPV vaccine. This is just from basically stating the same thing, that vaccine safety represents one of the main concerns associated with lack of acceptance of HPV vaccination in many parts of the world. So just to sum up, drug safety concerns lead to uncertainty, to worry, both among patients and among doctors. They may lead to patients not being prescribed treatment because of concerns, and they also may lead to difficulties in implementing vaccination programs. I thought I'd give a few examples of how we've been working with drug safety and with drug safety concerns. So the pharmacoepi group at Statens Serum Institute in Copenhagen is led by Dr. Anders Wied. He's a statistician by training and started out in vaccine safety and kind of expanded to different fields of pharmacoepi. We've been working with basically roughly 4 different lines of drug safety, pharmacoepidemiology, one being addressing risk signals, that is kind of looking out and seeing what's going on right now, what seems to be important, what's concerning people, and trying to jump onto that. That could be antibiotics, that could be cardiovascular drugs. I'll present briefly a study later on. We've been working with safety of drugs in pregnancy, trying to kind of fill out these black holes of missing data. We've been working with vaccine safety, mostly within influenza vaccines and the HPV vaccines. And also we've tried to enter the field of comparative effectiveness. That is, most drugs that are available have been tested against placebo in trials. But once they get onto the market, we don't really know if one drug within a class is actually different in terms of efficacy with respect to another drug within the same class, and they are seldom compared in trials. So one way of studying this is trying to use observational data to look at the comparative effectiveness. I think this is too difficult, actually, but we still try. So To study these things, we've been using register data in Denmark. So Mats Melby is the head of the Department of Epidemiology Research at Statens Serum Institute, and he always says Denmark's great for register research, and it is because it has nationwide registers. And what we've been using for most of our work is the prescription register, which has data for over 20 years now, since 1995. So we know, well, we have information about all prescriptions issued at all pharmacies in the entire country of Denmark for 20 years. And we can link it up to other registers, for instance, the patient registry, and by that we can study potential adverse events. So this is one example of a study that we've done within the area of risk signals. So this was published 3 years now ago, and studying the association between use of azithromycin, which is a commonly used antibiotic in some countries, and cardiovascular death. So azithromycin is actually the most commonly used antibiotic in the US, together with amoxicillin, and around 50 million prescriptions are issued each year in the US alone. So in 2012, a study came in the New England Journal of Medicine finding a strong association between azithromycin use and the risk of cardiovascular death, almost a threefold increase in risk. This led to the following this, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the US, issued a warning and a label update warning about the potential of cardiovascular, an increased cardiovascular risk. So it's a drug safety concern. We had to look at it. What we noted was that the publication, the study finding this risk signal studied a high-risk population. So we asked the question, what about the average patient, like the average office patient, and designed a study within the Danish national registers. So we did a register-based cohort study. It covered about 14 years in Denmark, and we restricted the population to outpatients and those who were young and middle-aged, basically. We did two analyses, one comparing azithromycin to no use of antibiotics. That involved around 1.1 million prescriptions and as many controls. And we also did a second analysis comparing azithromycin to penicillin. So in our study, this is the first analysis comparing azithromycin with no antibiotics. We found that current use of azithromycin was associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular death, with the strength of the association quite similar to the one in the previous report. However, when we compared azithromycin with penicillin, we found no difference. So the explanation, at least for our results, we believe, is that confounding by indication. So this is a term usually used or often used in pharmacoepidemiology, just underlining that a drug is always prescribed for a reason. And in this case, it is infection, and some infections may lead to death. So it also underlines the importance of using an active comparator. And we always try to look at absolute risks, not only relative risks. And in this case, given that it's a negative study, we are looking at the confidence interval around the null finding. And we believe that our study is not consistent with a clinically meaningful effect, given that the largest difference that we would expect would be around 10 cases per 1 million treatment episodes. So, to conclude, In a population of young and middle-aged outpatient adults, azithromycin was not associated with increased risk of cardiovascular death. And so probably the previously reported association may be restricted to high-risk patients, but we didn't study that. The second example is from drugs in pregnancy, also published 3 years ago now, looking at a drug called ondansetron. It's used in pregnancy and association with adverse fetal events. So ondansetron is used for nausea. What we know is that more than half of all pregnant women experience nausea and vomiting. And the clinical spectrum is quite wide, just varying from just some morning sickness to actually a few percent of patients being hospitalized because of this and losing weight and so on. We also know that 10 to 15% of women with nausea and vomiting receive drugs. In looking after drug safety concerns, we noted this study, just a descriptive study, looking at time trends of anti-nausea medication use in the US in early pregnancy. And we were really surprised to find that ondansetron had increased and in the years 2006 to 2008 was actually used by around 3% of the pregnant population in the US. And looking at just a list of top drugs, it was the 5th most commonly used prescription medication overall. So it's really popular in at least some areas of the US. And this is very, very surprising because the safety data on this drug are limited to a cohort of 106, or were limited to a cohort of 176 exposed women and a small case control study. And this is obviously not enough to state that the drug is safe. It's a drug safety concern. So we had to jump at it. So we did a register-based study in Denmark. And we identified all registered pregnancies between 2004 and 2011. We did a propensity score matching design, and propensity scores are scores to simultaneously capture a large number of potential confounders and just adjust for all of them using one single value. So it's really effective when you have low counts of outcome events. And basically we linked a number of different registers, and obviously the medical birth register was key to the study in order to identify newborns and their mothers. Just looking descriptively, we also noted that ondansetron exposure had increased in Denmark, but the prevalence rates were not nearly as high in the US. In Denmark, it was around 0.7% in the years 2010 to 11. So we identified a cohort of approximately 2,000 exposed women. So these are the main results from the study. Basically, we found no association between ondansetron exposure and major birth defects, preterm delivery, low birth weight, small for gestational age, and stillbirth. But as you can see, for some of the outcomes, the confidence intervals are still relatively wide. So basically, we conclude that ondansetron was relatively safe in pregnancy, but that these data need to be confirmed, and that additional studies of specific birth defects are needed. So I think I'll stop here actually, because in the interest of time, and I'll be happy to take questions. Isn't that right? I have time until 1:15. Yeah. I'll be happy to take questions.